2017 has come and gone. All that happened last year, and it was a whirlwind of happenings, now recedes into history. Think of how that happened in previous years, right? You come up to the new year and it's like, whoa, science fiction is happening. Let me see what this is about. Yes. Yes. Oh, somebody wanted to know how to find us. The Comfort Inn, DFW Airport North. You want to tell them how to get here, Edwin?
Yeah.
He's trying to find us. Isn't that great?
Full service. When the
Yeah,
speaker stops and gets
that's right. Anyway, so think about how in previous years it seemed like science fiction with a new year rolling around. You have trouble writing the correct year on your checks and things like that. And then it became, just as 2017 did, been there, done that type of thing. How about 1984? That was a scary year, right? And did you remember anything that happened in 1984? You do? Something big, dramatic happened in your life maybe, but it's a distant memory now, if we remember much of it, besides that it was no big deal. Well, there were a number of video reviews of 2017 that have been out now, and I'm going to let you see what I thought was one of the better ones. It does leave out many things that we took notice of, but does a pretty good job overall. In 7 minutes, it says.
My fellow Americans, it has been the honor of my life to serve. Together, we will make America great again. Thank you, God bless you, and God bless America.
How does it feel to feel happy?
Happy? I feel good. More than 1 million Americans are sending a message to President Trump on the day after his inauguration. Women leading marches across this country, and really around the world.
Who treats a woman that way? And he's setting that example for all the kids that are growing up in America, that it's okay to treat women the way he treats them, which is wrong.
Not anymore. There was chaos and confusion at airports today as President Trump's immigration crackdown took effect.
They're being greeted by attorneys, volunteer attorneys, who have come to help anyone who has been detained.
There's a mistake. Moonlight, you guys won Best Picture.
I really would like to take this moment to congratulate Venus. She's an amazing person.
An absolute shame on humanity. That's how the international aid organization CARE is describing the deepening humanitarian crisis in Yemen.
Children have paid the highest price in a war now in its third year.
Protests on the streets of Venezuela turning deadly.
Monday's vote gives Venezuelan President Nicolas Maduro full control of the assembly.
Siempre va a estar en las calles luchando por la libertad de mis hijos. Y bueno.
The event was billed as a protest against plans to remove a Confederate monument in Charlottesville, Virginia. But at the end of a violent day, 1 woman was killed and 19 other people were injured.
You had a group on one side that was bad, and you had a group on the other side that was also very violent.
I come today with a very heavy heart because President Trump, our president, has literally betrayed the conscience of our country.
22 dead, 59 wounded, many struggling for their lives right now.
Ariana Grande back on stage 13 days after the bombing that injured and killed so many young fans.
North Korea late today launching a new missile. Flying higher and longer than any missile that country has launched before.
Rocket Man should have been handled a long time ago.
A royal decree has been issued in Saudi Arabia, giving women the right to drive.
A country once afraid of change, now it seems changing all at once.
Total solar eclipse. The first seen coast to coast across America in nearly a century.
The United States will withdraw from the Paris Climate Accord.
This will be the day that the United States resigned as the leader of the free world.
When you work your entire life to create something and you see it gone, it's very difficult, it's very hard.
Hurricane Irma is now the most powerful storm ever recorded in the open Atlantic Ocean.
2 days after Hurricane Maria, all of Puerto Rico is still without power. They may have no electricity for months to come.
A powerful earthquake has just struck Mexico City.
So many everyday citizens running into help.
As I'm sure you can imagine, we are devastated and we are still processing all of this.
It all started with Hollywood producer Harvey Weinstein, and since then, the floodgates have opened.
We tried to find one place where women were safe, so we Googled sexual harassment Antarctica, and we found this article from 5 fucking days ago.
All right, come on, what about the president?
Listen, okay? If you got your thing out, and she got all her clothes on, you're wrong. You're
Devastating. 7.3 magnitude earthquake has rocked the Middle East overnight. Hundreds dead along the border of Iran and Iraq. An urgent search for survivors now.
Wouldn't you love to see one of these NFL owners, when somebody disrespects our flag, to say, get that son of a bitch off the field right now, out, he's fired. He's fired!
This is a protest about whether or not the country has fulfilled its promise of equal protection under the law to all of its citizenry. And that conversation is one no one wants to have.
More than 300 people were killed in what's seen as the worst attack in Egypt's modern history.
It's the first time that the militants target worshippers inside a mosque.
More than 500,000 Rohingya refugees have left Myanmar for Bangladesh, fleeing what the United Nations has called a, quote, textbook example of ethnic cleansing.
President Robert Mugabe has resigned.
Today it's victory. It's victory in our hearts. It's victory for our children. And
this has been an incredible mission, an incredible spacecraft, and you're all an incredible team. Now I'm going to call this the end of mission. Project manager off the net.
You know, now that a professional wrestler is our president, anything is possible. You know that statement, anything is possible, used to have a positive connotation? Anything is possible. Now we're all like, anything is possible.
Hey, one last thing. I just want to say, anything is possible, Box Video fans. Anything. Okay?
So what do y'all think of that?
Terrible. Then you have celebrity deaths.
Well, that's
They
true.
always do.
Yeah, that's true. Well, what was at least as important as those?
Yeah, to keep something else out?
That's what I'm saying, huh?
Something else?
Yeah, yeah, is anything strike you as being missing? Thought they did a pretty good job, so that's why I showed that. What sort of year do you think 2017 was? Was it closer to Utopia or closer to Dystopia? I guess that's how you feel about it, President. Well, here's some other things that happened on January 7th. There we go. In 1610, Galileo made his first observation of the 4 Galilean moons, Ganymede, Callisto, Io, and Europa, but he was not able to distinguish the last 2 until the following day. In 1894, a fellow named William Kennedy Dixon received a patent for motion picture film. In 1927, they established transatlantic telephone service through cable laid on the ocean floor. And here it is less than 100 years later, the whole world's connected with satellites. Isn't that amazing? In 1968, Surveyor 7, the last spacecraft in the Surveyor, that was a lunar series, spacecraft sent to the moon, lifted off from Launch Complex 36A at Cape Canaveral. Of course, a year and a half later, Neil Armstrong and Buzz Aldrin came on the moon. In 1999, the Senate trial in the impeachment of U.S. President Bill Clinton began. And today is Christmas for the Eastern Orthodox churches and the Oriental Orthodox churches using the Julian calendar. They're still using the Julian calendar.
It was yesterday, but the Christmas was yesterday.
Yeah, well, Christmas Eve, I don't know if they do Christmas Eve and Christmas like
Well, I
we
think
do,
they still do.
but Wikipedia said it's the 7th.
They still do.
Where's that at?
Orthodox.
Turkey and all that? Russia?
Yeah.
Russian Orthodox,
Greeks.
Really? It's Christmas,
yeah.
huh?
Well, they're-
Pretty much most Eastern European is Orthodox, and they're Christmas on the 6th of January. I didn't know that.
That's a pit.
Well, they certainly were going to change their calendar because the Pope of the Western Church sent to.
Isn't that the Epiphany? The January 6th?
Yeah, I think they do something like that.
I didn't know this until recently. It was my
7
church
days, and then
told
when you
me.
take the kid to the
It's
temple.
the 6th. I said, no, it's 25th. No, it's 6th. I said, when?
Ukraine celebrates both, so their kids get
Hey, the
presents.
more parties, the better.
Oh, yeah.
Is Santa Claus willing to
I'm
just
moving- I'm moving to Ukraine.
Maybe it makes the job easier for
Western
some.
Ukraine.
All these calculations,
They
Right.
stay away
I
from
mean,
the
that's the
States.
estimate every night.
That's
You can
exactly
cut
right.
that in half.
Yeah, exactly. That would make a big help, so. Anyway, what is a fellowship of unbelievers anyway? What is an atheist church? Well, there's an audio-only interview of Bible scholar and atheist Bart Ehrman. If you haven't never read any of his books, you should. Jesus Misquoted or something like that is a good one. There was no details about who was interviewing him, when, where, or what was happening, but it said it was uploaded on the 10th of July, 2012. So in this interview, Ehrman was asked, what would you say to the evangelicals and Bible-pumping believers about believing in your scholarship on the one hand and still finding meaning in the Bible? And this is what Ehrman answered. He said, I think that people need to look at scholarship and not accept it or reject it because it just happens to agree with the points of view they already have. I think it's important to look at what scholars are saying and look at what the evidence is and then make a decision. If it means having to change what you believe about the Bible or believe about God or believe about Jesus, if the facts seem to be taking you in a certain direction, you should go with the facts. Well, Ehrman's writings and those of others clearly show that the facts do not support the many claims made for the Bible by believers, much less for the events related to the Gospels. And as we discussed much of this last time at our December service, but what is striking here, what really struck me, is this idea of having to make a decision. Yes, we should always go with the facts, but there's no need to make a decision. The problem is already that so many have made a decision to have points of view that they already have, that such people need to undecide. And that's strange if you think about that. There's no word. Undecide is not a word, and there's no other word that I can think of that means undecide, but there should be. I guess it's a reflection on our culture. As freethinkers, we don't just decide what to believe and then become people with points of view that whatever that belief entails. It's sufficient to know for us that we comprehend and understand the facts as well as the best way or the most plausible way of putting the facts together. And when we leave off considering something, there's no need to feel that we've made a decision. We've just parked our thinking. That's all. We can get back in and go over the same ground or different ground whenever we want, because the facts remain the facts, although new facts may come to light, or new ways of assembling the facts may be thought of. And I will tell you, in my professional area of medicine, it happens all the time that facts previously not thought to have anything to do with the subject turn out to be relevant. So that's why you don't need to make a decision. So for example, we discussed in December the evidence that the Gospels were written in the mythic genre of the time. We discussed that many of the events described in the New Testament simply do not make sense, or if they happened, certainly would have drawn the attention of the authorities, and especially the writers of the time. Can you imagine the Roman authorities hearing about this guy that was crucified, and now he's walking around and up to the same antics? You don't think there'd be a manhunt to find this guy and bring him to the justice that somehow he escaped? You know, and many things like that. Believers don't even consider these things. Many respond to the idea that Jesus may not have existed by saying that other ancient figures may not have existed either. But you see, no one's making supernatural claims for Socrates. Nothing that Socrates supposedly did or said affects the arguments attributed to him. So here, for example, is the famous Euthyphro dilemma. How many have ever heard that term before? The Euthyphro dilemma. This comes from the Platonic dialogue by the same name, where Socrates and others are talking about right and wrong. And this is the quote, is what is morally good commanded by God because it's morally good? Or is it morally good because it's commanded by God? You see the distinction there? Does it really matter what the exact words were? And is this any less of an important problem if Socrates never existed? No, it's a huge problem for those who claim that God is where morality comes from. And it forms no part of how anyone may try to resolve this dilemma and make sense of it, whether Socrates existed or not. And that's what Freethought is about. It's not about believing in things, much less making a decision to believe in one thing or another. It's about making sense of things and realizing how this is done. So the process is, that you're aware of the process. So this church does not have dogmas and doctrines. There are no beliefs that you have to take on faith and no doctrinal statements that you have to sign, and you'll be driven out if you deviate from that. But this is what we have for now, a brief expression of what we aspire to, and we're always interested in knowing what you think of this. We don't want to make it more lengthy, but certainly we can say it in a different way. So if you think about this and it mumbles around in your brain for a while, shoot us an email or post on our forums. That is our website there, churchoffreethought.org. I was told by our webmaster that you have to put an HTTPS that everybody's upgrading security on the internet now. But we put the most effort into our monthly service, yet we have other things going on during every month. These are all listed on the back of your bulletin, which if you lose yours, it's posted online, and the one for January will go online soon. You can always do more, but it takes people, it takes ideas, and it takes people interested and willing to put those ideas into action. So how about any of you? No pressure. You always need help for what we're already doing, especially the services. And John is going to talk today, and also Mike, so you don't have to listen to me drone on. But there's all kinds of things that could be done. We're always open to doing more. It could be just a one-time event. Use your imagination, put your free thinking into action. Of course, no one makes money from our church other than the hotel here. And by the way, they told us today, if you can help yourself to water and coffee, all you want out there. We just have a water station here, but you can get coffee out there. But they don't want us eating any of their eggs and bacon. So there's a $10 charge if you want to come early and have their breakfast, which is not a bad deal for what they give you. The payoff for volunteering and being active in the church, first of all, we've all made friends, and that's a big motivator to come and see people we know and care about. But there's genuine satisfaction also in participating in what is a real labor of love, and we can hope a tiny step in moving towards a future without supernaturalism. So Kit and Merlin, where is Kit?
She's a babysitter.
Is she with the kids?
Yeah.
Okay, so there are some kids here today. So Kit and Merlin trade off with Child Care Sunday School, but I know they welcome others who may want to take a hand in that. Next month, February 4th, we're going to talk about Love in the Age of Reason. Valentine's Day on the 14th just seemed like a good seat of the pants title. It was actually suggested by Rusty, our webmaster. So it should be an enjoyable and fascinating session. Please join us for that. Also, we celebrate in February the birthday of the church, because our first service was in 1995 in February. I have to look up the exact date. And Milgan is going to bring birthday cake.
I've been voluntold.
You've been volunteered. Yep.
I'm kidding, it's okay.
All right, so next up is going to be Mike Zapp. Mike is a physical therapist who got to talking last time about certain health recommendations and all, and volunteered to do our moment of science on blood pressure and other things. So,
Good morning to you.
Don't want to steal your fire, but Mike knows what he's talking about. Do you want to use this and put it up to your shirt?
doing home care, so you can't come to my clinic. I will come to your house if you need this therapy. There were a couple of research studies came out last year. We probably heard it on the news, or if you read it online, you may know it. So for the people who didn't hear about it, I'll just tell you what happened. Back in October, there was a new research coming out. It was published by American Heart Association and American College of Cardiology. What they did some research. They studied people who have high blood pressure. They studied people who have high blood pressure if they have symptoms and it's affecting their life. And some of them were treated with exercise and diet and conservative measures. Some of them were past the stage 1 or 2. They had to do medication. But what they did after doing all this research and study, they said, okay, let's get together, all the cardiologists did, and let's get together and think about why are we calling blood pressure high, at what number is it considered high. So the old standard as of October 1st of last year, it used to be 140/90, that was high blood pressure, and it has been, I don't know for how many years, for probably more than 10 years. Then they said, okay, let's see what it is, what are we gonna agree on. So the cardiologists got together and then they said, well, the new guidelines should be lowered because so many Americans have high blood pressure, which is a silent killer. Most of us, we may not have symptoms, we may not even have pain, or we're not bleeding, we don't even know it. And sometimes it doesn't get diagnosed, never gets treated in so many cases. So they said, we're gonna lower the 140/90 to the new guideline, which is 130/8. This is pretty much what it says. ACC is American College of Cardiology, AHA is American Heart Association. The old definition, the old guideline for high blood pressure is 140/90. Before October 1st, that was the case. So if you would go to your primary care doctor, and if you had, let's say, 141/91, they would say, let's do some blood pressure medicine, or let's have you work on your diet and exercise and lifestyle changes. As of October 2nd, when this was published and it was agreed on, all the doctors with the new guidelines, they're going to prescribe medication for you if the diet and exercise doesn't lower your blood pressure, if your blood pressure is more than 130. According to the research that they did, and they surveyed, I don't know how many people, 46% of Americans have high blood pressure. So many of us, we don't know it. So pretty much half of us have high blood pressure, we don't know. And we may not even seek treatment. Another thing that popped out was among the youngster or adults younger than 45. For male adults younger than 45 is 3 times more likely to have high blood pressure than females. So unfortunately, as a guy, I'm more likely to get it than my girlfriend. And that's the case. Women have twice as much, I guess, it's double, basically. Thanks. What does high blood pressure do to our body? So it can cause trouble. These are the most common ones that are, some of them could be fatal, some of them could lead to strokes and paralysis and a lot of medical problems. So the number one, according to American Heart Association, is heart attacks and strokes. So high blood pressure can cause hardening and thickening of the arteries, which is called atherosclerosis, and it can cause heart attacks, strokes, other complications. Unfortunately, I've seen and treated stroke patients when I used to work in inpatient rehab, and a lot of it. It's not fun to have half of our body paralyzed, or one arm paralyzed, or be in a wheelchair for the rest of our life. So it's not fun to have this, or even a heart attack, which may kill us. Aneurysm is another thing. Sometimes they may not present with pain, we may not have really a headache, we may not have really nausea, vomiting, or any symptoms, but aneurysm is basically as a result of high blood pressure, which can affect your blood vessels. Blood vessels that are weakened, they can bulge. Some cases they can pop, and they can cause brain bleed, and they can cause a stroke. So if aneurysm ruptures, it can be definitely life-threatening. The third one that they mentioned is the heart failure. Why do we have heart failure? Well, your heart is pumping against arteries, against the pressure in your vessels or arteries, pressure as a result of high blood pressure, you may have your heart muscle starts thickening. So the heart gets a little thickened. It's not going to be an efficient pump, and thickened heart muscle causes heart failure, a simple word. The next is going to be narrow weakened blood vessels in your kidney. So many times kidney failures can happen as a result of high blood pressure. It's an area I don't practice in the urology or kidney diseases, but I've heard from one of my friends who's a urologist. He has a lot of patients that have kidney failures, and the primary reason for it is high blood pressure when it's not treated. Thickened and narrowed or torn blood vessels in the eyes. Not everybody with high blood pressure will have vision loss or will have visual problems, but there are some cases that definitely can cause the loss of vision, blurred vision, or difficulty. Metabolic syndrome is a cluster, it's a combination of a bunch of syndromes which can happen as a result of untreated high blood pressure. So what is it? It can include waist circumference. Like you have an increase in the midsection, so that's very common. You may have high triglyceride or high cholesterol. Your HDL can be really high. And the high blood pressure, your insulin. So basically, the metabolic syndrome is a cluster of symptoms that are direct result of untreated high blood pressure. And of course, you can lead to diabetes, heart disease, and stroke. Then trouble with memory and understanding. So uncontrolled high blood pressure, I don't think there is a direct link between dementia, Alzheimer's, and high blood pressure, but it can affect it, and it will affect the memory and understanding and trouble with memory. What's the take-home message? Well, if you don't check your blood pressure regularly, please do. Make sure you check it at least once a month. Make sure you pay attention to it. If it's high, if it's higher than 130/80, consult with your PCP, primary care doctor. Make sure you do the modifications for your diet, your lifestyle, and don't ignore it because it's something that is called silent killer for a good reason. You may not bleed, you may not have pain, you may not notice it in your daily life, but it can cause a stroke and heart attacks, so we should take it seriously. The next study that came out actually a month after this one, which was in November, as of November of last year, they said, well, let's think about drinking tonight. If you're going to go and have a glass of wine tonight, if you want to go and party tonight, let's think about it twice. So they linked alcohol consumption with cancer. Most of us, we don't even think about like, oh, I'm going to drink tonight, well, so what? It's not going to cause anything. I should make sure I don't get drunk. I should make sure legally I don't get in trouble with driving my car because it's against the law. But according to a new study came out in November, alcohol use, whether light, moderate, or heavy. So you can say, well, I'll just drink half a glass of wine every night or every other day. Even light is absolutely linked with increasing risk of several leading cancers. So what are they? Head and neck, esophagus, colon cancer, breast cancer, and that's the new evidence is gathered by OSCO, American Society of Clinical Oncology, which I have a close friend of mine who's an oncologist, and guess what? He drinks, and he drinks a lot. But that's what their association says. According to OSCO, it's a direct Sorry. I'm not finished yet, sorry. Two more slides. Bear with me 2 or 3 more slides.
Can I ask you a question while you're talking, while he's doing that? When you talk about 140/90 or 130/80, can you explain what those two numbers are actually measuring?
Yes. The top number is called systolic. Systolic blood pressure is the pressure in your arteries when the heart is actually pumping. So when it's full speed, when it's gushing through your aorta and through the rest of the body, that's where it's measured. That's the high number. The diastolic, in the bottom number, is when the heart is expanding and is resting. So the pressure, look at it like it's a huge squeeze or it's a pump when it's at high speed of blood gushing out. it's gonna be the
So
systolic.
blood pressure is not constant, it goes like this.
And when it
So they measure it
expands,
at the top and at the bottom.
at the bottom is when the pressure is taken, when there's still pressure in your blood vessels, that's the diastolic, the bottom, which is actually the most important one. Because let's say if I start running, if I start exercising, or even if you're stressed, your systolic, or the top number, can go up quick. The diastolic should pretty much stay flat. It goes up very slow, but the top number goes up very quick with exercise, stress, or any stimulant. And of course, medications can affect our blood pressure. So what do most people think about alcohol? Well, most Americans, 70% of Americans do not recognize drinking alcohol as a risk factor for cancer. So they did the research, they did the survey, the same organization, OSCO. 70% said, nope, it's not going to touch me, it's not going to have or cause any cancer. But according to OSCO, 5 or 6% of new cancers are directly related to drinking alcohol. And that's pretty much the same thing. President of OSCO, Dr. Bruce Johnson, that's the guy who actually published this research, and he has multiple books about it.
So what are they recommending?
What are they recommending? We'll talk about that. Just one. Consuming alcohol during cancer treatment. So what about if I have cancer and I'm getting chemotherapy, or I'm getting some treatment, or I'm getting radiation? Of course, my oncologist friend tells you, you should not drink when I'm giving you radiation. You should not drink when I'm giving you chemotherapy. So even when we're getting cancer treatment, we should not drink, because that affects the treatment and it negatively impacts the cancer treatment. So, take home message: limit your alcohol intake if you can. Completely quit drinking if you can. So me and my girlfriend, we decided to quit drinking. That's a New Year's resolution, and so far we haven't been drinking. I don't think anyone has ever died or had any symptoms or any disease from not drinking or from not smoking. It's a choice, so we made that choice.
How can you measure a negative? Not drinking.
How can you measure the negative effect on
By
what?
comparison to the positive.
Right.
How
Or
can
by
I compare
doing
the
a
positive,
survey.
because I haven't been drinking, how can I compare it?
Perfect, and you're in the control group and everybody.
So the risk is lower, basically. We all may get cancer regardless, but the risk is lower. The risk can be lower by 20 to 30%. It depends on which book you're reading.
I mean,
So,
it's
It
just,
says
doesn't make sense.
Remember Christopher Hitchens?
It
Y'all
says
know who
light-
Christopher Hitchens
it
was?
says light
You
use
cannot
or
measure that.
We always drink bourbon or debates.
He was known for being a heavy drinker, and he died of esophageal cancer.
So, do you mean say eradicate alcohol completely, because even it says light drinking can cause
it can cause it. So what do we do if you're a drinker and if you can cut back? If you're a drinker and if you really can live without it, like me and my girlfriend, just cut it out. It's like a smoking. I have patients, they're in their 80s, like, hey Mike, I've been drinking and I've been smoking for 8 years, guess what? I don't have even cancer. So this is not relevant. But then I have people in their 50s and they have all kinds of cancer, all kinds of cardiovascular disease because of smoking and drinking. So,
What do you think about that red wine that they tell you, glass of red wine,
whose
and say,
book are you reading? Whose research are you listening to? Is it sponsored by the winery? Is
I
it
don't know.
sponsored?
what about resveratrol inside, in the grape?
Resveratrol.
That goes,
That whole thing
resveratrol.
is a scam, there's the guy who's making all the.
I would go with nutrition.
Is it a scam? What are we talking about?
Okay, so
There is a.
When my daughter gets her RD, and then she'll come and give us a talk.
there you go.
It's a scheme called red grape.
Say again.
Alcoholism is one of the only drugs
Thing
out
called
there.
resveratrol. It's
Stuff
good
like
for your
that.
heart.
Good. Probably other.
Oh, like that.
He thinks it's a.
I have a question about the study. The studies, are they showing correlation, or are they showing some type of causal effect? And what is their population size? Is there a way for them to explain what is the impact? So you have a bunch of things in there that show high blood pressure does this.
Right.
What is the actual action that alcohol does that creates cancer?
Okay, that part, I pulled
Who's it
some
saying
of
about
this
studies?
information from OSCO, American Society of Clinical Oncologists. The
Yeah.
study that they researched for the public, I mean, the
Oh, yeah.
study that they published for the public is not that detailed. It doesn't even tell you what's the number of samples. I'm sure there's a way of Googling it and finding it out. But the one that I picked up, which is on OSCO's main page, does not show you the samples of our people they studied, what's the correlation. It says this is like
Who is doing the
this
study?
is
That's,
the outcome.
who's paying for it and who's doing it?
But I'm sure you can find it.
The other question
Anybody
I have
else,
is,
anybody,
have they done
anybody
studies
has a
at
vested
all about
interest in the
marijuana?
outcome, don't believe
I
it.
haven't looked at it, but again, I'm sure there are pros and cons, and California just passed it, right? Like, you can go to California and get marijuana.
It's
In
contradicting,
Colorado, way back, so.
it's contradicting federal laws. That's gonna be a problem there.
Right, but I'm asking, what
Oh,
is the
wow.
science behind it?
I haven't studied.
Other than feeling good, I don't
even
know.
think we know the mechanism for cigarette smoking causing cancer.
That makes
Of
sense.
course, it's very
We're
difficult
27
to do
minutes in, I
studies
don't think
where
Tim's
you
gonna have a chance to do
randomize
this.
1,000 people each
It's
to
like
a control group
statistics.
and another group that smokes
There's
cigarettes.
statistics,
There's
there's
liars,
do that study.
statistics.
No, no, no.
There's
liars
and liars,
and
and then there's
The association may be a little.
It's kind of like,
alcohol
it's kind of
and
like,
as I say, I don't think
Is that Mark
it's
Twain?
understood.
I don't know,
But remember,
it sounds like
professional,
something,
associations,
that's what I think about
organizations,
studies, pretty much.
You're talking about multiple people who have
Well, they're good
discussions,
studies. The
raise the
problem
kind of
is that there's so
questions
many
you're talking
bad
about.
studies
We don't want to get egg on our face,
that,
we want to
you know,
stick to the facts as best we can.
left.
I think we
You really
sometimes
gotta have-
forget that just because some organization
I
says
think
something,
the American Medical
it's not
Association,
like
for
they're an
example,
authority, but they do go through the
ought to
scientific process.
aggressively go after studies that are not, that have a.
And I pulled this from
conflict
two
of interest.
most reliable sources, American Heart Association, American College of Oncology.
Oh, yeah.
They're pretty reliable.
Was an American Heart Association the source for the information about red wine over the years? And over the years that there's been, I thought that it was the American Heart Association.
Well, remember, the guidelines can change. Every year they come up with new studies, new research, and it just completely is different from what they said last year.
I think it's also possible that both conclusions are true. There may be that a little bit of red wine is good for your heart, and that in some people it causes cancer. I mean,
Or it could be both.
Yeah, that's right.
But I don't think, let's say tonight, I'm gonna go home and we have a salad, and then if I wanna drink half a glass of wine, and if I say, okay, well, let's forget about it. What about if I add, I don't know, some carrot juice and orange juice, which what we drank this morning? Carrot juice, organic carrot juice, and I don't think I would have a high risk of cancer from carrot juice and organic.
Remember,
Or
we're talking about
or berries or
we're
something.
talking about statistical risk, so
Right.
it's applicable to the individual, but not in individual cases, so. I mean, Will's wife got lung cancer, and she hadn't even been exposed, that was not a smoker, but she got exposed to secondhand smoking with a prior marriage. Now she gets lung cancer. I mean, how messed up is that?
Second-hand smoke?
I'm not a drinker and I'm not advocating it, but I thought it was funny that Betty White she just celebrated like her 90th
90-something,
birthday.
yes.
What are your two favorite foods? Oh, vodka and hot dogs and pineapple.
Yes. And that would be the case of my 85-year-old patient coming in, like I've been drinking and I've been smoking and see I don't have cancer. And then there are people in their 50s and so some of it is like genetics, some of it is our lifestyle.
But nobody ever asks how much Steve Jobs drank. Right?
Did he?
I don't know. So, we know that television personality, I think it was Tim Russert, it got out with some
He
of
died in
his
his 50s,
cholesterol,
yeah.
yes, and some of the information got out about his blood pressure and cholesterol numbers, and they were bad. And his dad had died young from heart disease
He
also.
didn't learn his lesson from
So these are all just, these two things, blood pressure and alcohol, just relate to your overall risk. That also depends on, Merlin's been all kind of flying at 30,000 feet, probably got hit by extra cosmic rays and stuff, and who knows what they've done to his DNA. He seems pretty normal to us, but.
May I say something that might help some people? When you consume alcohol, it substitutes in your blood cells water for alcohol. It's a diuretic. It takes a lot of water out of your system. You don't know that until you get into a crack where you're really losing water and you're getting in trouble because you can't make enough saliva to digest your food, or enough fluid in your large intestine to pass the stool, or enough tears to keep your eyes lubricated. This is called the Sjogren's syndrome, after a Swedish gentleman came up with it, found out that water is the most important thing, and alcohol is a diuretic. It doesn't take much math to figure out what you gotta do.
My ex-wife has Sjogren's syndrome, and she was not a drinker. But I think what you're saying makes a lot more sense than what I'm hearing here. And the reason I say that is because you're not relying on statistics or correlation. What you're saying is, here is the effect of alcohol, and I would think that that would be experimentally provable, as opposed to statistics, which, depending on what factors you're controlling for, including genetics and other environmental factors, that I would rely more on something that's explanatory in that sense than statistical correlation.
Wouldn't Butler syndrome be considered part of it as well, which is a lack of diamond, which is also causes blood drain, and it makes it literally impossible for the person to think or have the blood issue.
So that, what is that
It's
again?
called Butler syndrome.
And it's blood drain?
Right. That's what they call it, is
Lack of thiamine?
yes, if you drink your body, it makes it diamond. Right. I don't know about that.
Did you have a question? I thought I saw you.
Yes, I had a question about hypertension thing. Okay, so the bar has been lowered, right? So 130. So my question was like two parts. Like one is like, what's the healthy range then that we are saying 130 over 80 is going to be high. So what's the healthy range that we are aiming for, and at what point does hypotension start? Like what's the lower range?
The healthiest blood pressure is the lowest one you can have without being in shock.
Right.
Pregnant women I care for all day long. Young women tend to have very flexible blood vessels, and there's a normal physiologic reduction in blood pressure because that feeds the placenta of the uterus better. We will sometimes take a blood pressure in the office, and it's like 100 over 10. Where you can hear the carotid cough sounds, a little spurt of the artery as you're taking the blood pressure all the way down to 10, or in some cases even 0. You can hear those sounds all the way down. Or the blood pressure is fluctuating. The diastolic is very important. It's responsible for about 2/3 of your total blood pressure, so that's definitely the one you don't want to have really high. Now, if somebody comes and has a blood pressure at 160 over 110, diastolic's pretty good. What that means, though, the difference is the pulse pressure. Somebody like that should have a bounding pulse if you can, really feel very well. The other thing, of course, is that people will come to see their doctor, they're taking up blood pressure and it's elevated, and the doctor starts saying, yeah, this is not a good thing. Oh, let me calm down, I know this is just that I'm stressed out and so on. And you just keep taking a blood pressure until it's normal. They used to even have a diagnostic entity called white coat hypertension, where blood pressure shot up when you're under stress. The doctor in a white coat coming in, or nurse to check your blood pressure. We know now that if you have white coat hypertension, if your blood pressure can fluctuate in response to stress, and who is not experiencing stress all the time, that is a risk as well. So we don't say, oh, well, your high blood pressure is explained by you're under stress, and you got to stop that traffic cop on your way to the office or whatever it may be. No, that needs to be treated. Now, if you want to take many additional measures, fine. But the downside of some of the blood pressure medications we have now, very tiny, and in fact, the ones that block adrenaline are used as lifestyle drugs by top executives and stuff. And this is what super spies take in order to pass a lie detector test. Kids have been shown to get better scores on the SAT when they are put on medication like this. And that you can do the study, because you can randomize people and see, gee whiz, you put them on this beta blocker, they don't even have high blood pressure, because if somebody doesn't have high blood pressure, it's not really going to lower the blood pressure so much as just make them feel more calm so they can remember what they need to when they take the test. So don't think, if you don't know what your blood pressure is, get it checked. And if it's elevated, check it again if you want. But don't quail, don't hesitate to go ahead and start on some medication. medicine too, the dose makes the poison. Maybe you just need a tiny dose of one of these antihypertensives, and that can improve your lifestyle. I've had many people who got started on one of these things say, you know, it helps me be more calm. So instead of feeling so stressed out.
Is it possible it might be genetic? Because all my life I had low blood pressure. I mean, right, like the other day, in the middle of the day, I mean, not in the morning, or it was 106 over, 69, and
Oh, good for you.
my heart,
Genetics
my heart-
definitely plays a role.
right, my heart rate is 65. It's usually 60 or something. It's really low.
That's pretty good. All right, well, we have a lot more material to cover.
What can you do? It's, to me, it's just the same thing as cholesterol. That could be genetics too.
Well, there's a genetic, it's nature, nurture, always is the nature, nurture thing, but.
Can I ask you just one more question? You can get your blood pressure taken at you can go to Walgreens.
Yeah, you get it taken for free.
Is that accurate?
Most of the time.
Okay.
Yeah, most of the time. All right, so this is because the Church of Freethought cares about your health. We can't afford to lose any free thinkers. Okay? So thank you very much, Mike. Let's give him a little applause. And I'm going to ask you next to welcome John Gauthier, who's been for years our videographer, and he's, like so many of us, a computer guy. He's going to talk about logical fallacies in 3 parts. So the first part is today. You have to come through additional services to get the other 2. So we can think of fallacies as mistakes in reasoning. Like many other things, we learn a lot from mistakes, and we should learn from our mistakes because knowledge comes from a process of trial and error, right? Isn't that what science does? You try one thing, it doesn't work. It's like when Edison was asked, oh gee, what about all those things that failed to make a light bulb? And he goes, oh, I learned 997 ways not to do it. And that relates to this wonderful saying, which you should incorporate into your brain. Good judgment comes from experience, and experience comes from bad judgment. The trick, of course, is to learn from the experiences and mistakes of others, and that's what John's going to talk about. He's going to continue to present periodically on this subject of mistakes in reasoning. I mean, if we think reason is so important, this is something we need to talk about. So, take it away, John. Thank you so much.
The microphone's probably the last.
Yeah, I don't know why it's doing that. Maybe it won't do that.
It's a small room.
Checking the things there.
Pick up on the recording. No, it's fine. See, he's just less staticky. You know, oh. Well, let's give it a shot.
All right, so very still. Okay, what's this arrow for? Oh, okay. We're going to be doing a 3-part series here on logical fallacies. Part 1 we're doing today is on the structure of arguments. Of course, I believe everyone here is here for a reason, and one of those reasons is, reason and facts is what we will want to, live our lives by. And in public discourse, it's very important to be able to look at what people are presenting in political debate, online, whatever, being able to look at those statements and being able to evaluate, can we determine whether or not what they're saying is true or false based on logic, facts, and reason, all right? So it's important to be able to do that. It's not always easy to do. Some logical fallacies are easy to identify, some are not. So let's go through some of this. All right, so let's start with logic. Logic is the science of reasoning, proof, thinking, or inference. Another definition here is it's a systematic study of the form of valid inferences. So an inference you'll often hear in public discourse an inference being made with the word therefore, hence, or ergo is being used, at least in a more structured argument. It's also a formal system for relating premises to conclusions, and we'll talk about those 2 terms here in a minute. Note the word formal, of course, implying a form or structure. All right, so that's we'll look at that formal arguments and informal arguments. So, for those of you who have a significant other, you may disagree on what an argument is. So let's look at what an argument is. It's a connected series of statements designed to establish a conclusion, a true or false conclusion. All right. you have both deductive and inductive arguments. Now, deductive, let's see if I can fix this. This is going to be a problem.
Yeah.
I'll tell you what, I'm just going to hold this.
Yeah.
I think it's at the other end of the wire, it's not that.
I think you're right, it's down here. That might be that. Okay, good. All right, so you have both deductive and inductive arguments. A deductive argument is a form of argument in which the conclusion is necessitated by the facts. Necessitated meaning if you have a valid formal argument, all right, then the conclusion must be true. It has to be true, all right? Now, an inductive argument is a form of argument in which the conclusion is only supported by the facts to some degree, all right? So, in a deductive argument, you're going from specific to general, and in an inductive argument, you're inferring a generalization from specific observations, all right? So you can support that the conclusion is true, but it doesn't necessitate that the conclusion is true.
Yeah, the thing is, a problem with that first one is in basing it on the facts. So often, the facts that are accepted are erroneous.
Right, and we'll get to that.
Yeah.
We're getting to that. Bear with me. All right, so what's the premise? The premise that you're talking about is a proposition that's accepted as truth or assumed to be true. Very important part of an argument, right? Both sides have to agree that the premise is true, which may not necessarily be the case. An inference is the process for deriving a proposition from one or more premises, okay? And then finally, the goal is, of course, to reach a conclusion, which is the last proposition in your argument, to be proven as true. Now, over here, we can look at this graphically. You have premises that go through a process of an inference that produce a proposition, okay? Now, in a sound argument, all the premises are true. You have a valid inference for the argument, which reaches a true conclusion. In a formal argument, that conclusion must be true if the inference is valid and the premises are true. And an example of unsound argument is one where you have an invalid inference, and which will produce a false conclusion. Another form of unsound argument is one in which you have one of your premises is false, and you have a valid inference, and usually you will result in a false conclusion, but not necessarily. You can actually, there's a form of logical fallacy where the conclusion can still be true, but the argument is unsound. But essentially, I should have put a question mark there on the slide, is that you don't know whether or not the conclusion is true or false in this example of an unsound argument. And once again, let's talk about the necessity of a formal argument having a true conclusion. You can't have this one. This can't happen. You can't have true premises and a valid inference and produce a false conclusion. That's just not logical. So let's look at logical fallacy. It's a defect in an argument which causes that argument to be invalid or unsound. And a formal fallacy is always a deductive, from a deductive argument. It's an error in the form of that argument. Informal fallacies can be those involving both either deductive or inductive arguments. All right, and this is an error in the content, not the form of the argument. Something wrong with that slide. You chose some bad colors there. I don't know if you can see this. Let's see how many slides are going to be like this. Uh-oh. We got a problem here. Okay, let me see if I can go through this and just read from it here. Here's an example, okay, of a formal fallacy where your argument is you have a premise. All elms are trees. Okay, it's something that we can, pretty much everybody here will agree is a valid premise, a true premise, all right? All trees are plants. Everybody agrees that's true here. We can have an argument about this, right? So the example here is where you reach a conclusion and say, well, all plants are elms. Well, to most of us, that's pretty obvious, a fallacious argument. There's a problem with this argument, although they might not necessarily know why, all right? And that's because it has an invalid form. all right? And if you can read this, the premise is all A or B, all right? And another premise is all B or C. And from set theory, which everybody probably took in grade school, the invalid form here is that all C are A. It's really an application of set theory. So what this is called is, I'm going to read this again, the fallacy of the list condition. Go ahead and finish this perfectly. All right? Which basically, you can see that elves are a subset of trees. Trees are a subset of plants. And they're saying that C cannot be a subset of A. All right? So you've got the Venn diagram. That's what we call the Venn diagram there, when you look at how sets are related. And a lot of logic also depends on the ability to classify things, right? You have to be able to classify elves as everything in that set is an elf, and so on. So here's an informal fallacy example, and I'm going to try to read what you probably can't read on these slides here, all right? So, because I didn't memorize this. So it says some geological events produce rock. Okay? The second premise is all rock producers are music producers. Okay? Now, right away, we can see these are some of the most obvious, problems with arguments. We can see these because rock is a type of music, right? So the conclusion is some geological events produce music. What makes this as an informal fallacy is that the problem is that they're actually applying a valid form here. The form is valid. Okay? It follows the some A or B, some B or C, and therefore some A are also C, right? But the diagrams aren't, if you look at it in a diagram form, the diagrams aren't right. What this is saying here is that some geological events produce music in this area, right here, of this Venn diagram. All right? So if you correct this, all right, what you see is, what you really should be doing is this, all right? Where there is no overlap between C and A, between music producers and geological events, right? And this is what it's called, and that's what I wrote down here, fallacy of equivocation. There's a problem with the content of the argument because they're saying that the word rock means the same thing in both premises. That's the problem with this one. That's the content. So you can correct it. You can say some rock producers, right, are music producers. And that's the problem. So, unfortunately, these, but if you'd have to have the slides to have these links, somebody can get them from me later if you want. But next week, and Jeff, part two, I meant to have on here on the next slide. Part two will be
more of this figuring out errors in reasoning.
Yeah. Yeah, I can't remember what part two is, but we'll cover it next time.
3 parts altogether, all very important.
So let's get these slides fixed next time.
You're gonna learn from your mistake today.
Exactly.
I'm also going to switch over to this other microphone.
Some colors cannot be read over
I think the problem
blue.
is
Yeah, something. But at any rate, yeah, it's the old, all robins are birds, but not all birds are robins, right? So, well, we're running a little bit late, and I was even going to show another video. How many don't mind if we run another 20 minutes?
Don't mind.
Don't mind, you're going to push through? Okay, that's good. All right, so there's a bunch of material in today's bulletin on the subject of Utopia, Dystopia. And maybe some items to add to your reading list there. Really it points out that it's distinctly human to anticipate, plan for, and especially to worry about the future. Don't we know how politicians will exploit that sort of thing? So will the future be a utopia, or at least better than what we have today, or will things be worse, dystopia? So I'll show this video that talks about the future, both short and long term. There's some parts that, the further they get out into the future, of course, the more kind of questionable it becomes. Let's see what you think about this. It's called 10,000 Years into the Future. Oh, don't want to delete it. No, don't do that. Or previously it adjusted the sound, so this should work.
Hello everyone. We're sure that many of you know something about our planet's past.
Dinosaurs, huge meteorites, ancient architectural monuments. Information about these things is available to everyone. But have you ever wondered what will happen to our planet in the future? Many modern scientists have been concerned about this issue for several decades. Fortunately, their knowledge helps us make predictions not only for the next few years, but also for the coming decades. In today's video, we're going on a trip to the future, and we're going to see what changes will take place in our planet in the next 10,000 years. Let's get it on. Of course, we're going to start in the near future. You probably want to know what you can see with your own eyes, right? Well, in 2019, new countries will appear on the world map. Bougainville Island, located in the Pacific Ocean, is officially an autonomous region of Papua New Guinea. However, in 2019, it can gain independence if a large part of its population votes for it at a specially convened meeting. And Nueva Caledonia, which is now part of France, can also become a separate country. In 2020, the construction of the tallest building on the planet will be completed. You all probably know that today's tallest building is the Burj Khalifa in Dubai. However, this record can be exceeded by 2020. In Saudi Arabia, they plan to complete the construction of the Jeddah Tower that will be the first one to reach the 1 kilometre high mark. That same year, the private company Bigelow Aerospace, dedicated to space tourism, will launch into orbit a ship that could become a hotel for Earthlings. The testing of these ships was successful, and one of them was used by cosmonauts at the ISS as a storage facility. In 2024, SpaceX is sending a rocket of the same name to Mars with different loads, and a couple of decades later, the first settlers on the red planet would arrive. Can you imagine? If you think that the idea of moving people to another planet is delusional, then you should know that this is completely plausible. UN experts predict that by 2025, the world's population will grow to 8 billion people, and by 2050, it'll be 10 billion. In 2026, the construction of the Sagrada Familia in Barcelona, which began in 1883, will be completed. The biggest problem with the construction is the need to design special stone blocks, which takes a lot of time. Therefore, in the near future, it'll be possible to finally visit this place and have a good look from the inside. No matter how sad it may seem, in 2028, Venice will be uninhabited. This doesn't mean that the city will be completely underwater, but there is reason to believe that living there will be impossible due to a significant increase in the water levels. And this is a horror story for those who've always been afraid of strange objects falling from the sky. By 2029, the Apophis asteroid will approach Earth at 23,859 miles, which can lead to the collision of this large stone with our planet. But we hope we won't share the same fate as dinosaurs, and this hot bundle will fly by. As we said, the most likely planet for life is Mars. In 2033, not only a cargo will be sent to this planet, but also a true manned mission called Aurora. Researchers want to make sure that the planet is suitable for many people. As you've probably already understood, the future is closely related to the study of outer space, and therefore, probes will be sent there in 2036 to study the star system of Alpha Centauri. The Breakthrough Starshot project is sending an entire fleet of spaceships to the nearest star. The spaceship will be fitted with solar sails. Prior to Alpha Centauri, the probes will fly for 20 years, but another 5 will be needed to send a message back to Earth about the successful arrival. By 2040, an experimental thermonuclear reactor will begin to work. The construction started in 2007 in southern France, 40 miles from Marseille. If someone doesn't know, this is necessary to get a lot of energy. The advantage of this reactor is its safety, because even in the event of an accident, the amount of emissions will be so small that there won't be a need for evacuation. Today, Antarctica is an almost completely unexplored and protected object, but by 2048, the ban on mineral extraction in this area won't exist anymore. Under the Antarctic Treaty System, no country can own this territory, and the continent itself is a non-nuclear zone. Mining is now also strictly prohibited, but scientists expect this agreement to be revised exactly in 2048. We don't quite understand how this was calculated, but scientists are confident that by 2050, the colonization of Mars will begin. By this time, people will be able to fly to the Red Planet within the framework of the Mars One project. But before that, scientists will have to solve many interplanetary travel problems. There is information that a special interplanetary elevator or something like that is planned to be built, but there's no official confirmation of such a novelty. Well, we told you about the closest changes on the planet. You ready to go further? Well then, scientists don't have any good news about the year 2100 because the weather would be ruined and chaos would rule over the world. The average daily temperatures on the planet will begin to rise, while diseases and the likelihood of war will increase. If you don't believe us, just take a look at the situation in today's world. Some regions of America are increasingly feeling the lack of water and suffering from droughts, while other regions suffer from terrible floods due to heavy rain each year. And there are more and more cases of forest fires due to the abnormal heat. And this global cataclysm has one reason. Overall, according to NASA experts, it's because of the carbon dioxide, which we emit in large quantities into the atmosphere. By early 2015, its concentration set a record and exceeded 400 particles per million. By 2100, it'll grow to 900. As a result of these adverse changes, the average daily summer temperature in cities such as Jerusalem, New York and Los Angeles will be 45 degrees Celsius, and in London and Paris over 30 degrees Celsius. It's hard to believe, but according to NASA estimates, there's almost a 100% chance that the Himalayan glaciers in the Everest region will melt. But as long as these events don't lead humankind to its end. Nevertheless, by the year 3000, the temperature can rise by 15 degrees Celsius worldwide, and the sea level will rise by more than 36 feet, flooding most of London. As a result of these sudden changes, the UK may become warmer or colder, but it'll turn into a warm region eventually. This can happen if the current North Atlantic system is altered and Britain loses the warm Gulf Stream. Ocean surface temperature will drop by 3 degrees, but if the Arctic ice melts, it'll increase again by 8 degrees in a short period of time. If we continue to burn fossil fuels, then the sea level and the temperature will keep growing, which can lead to the flooding of large areas of Bangladesh, Florida, and many other places that are too low above sea level. As a result, hundreds of millions of people will lose their homes. At the same time, the acidity of the oceans will decrease significantly, creating a threat to the existence of marine organisms such as coral and plankton. This in turn can affect the entire marine ecosystem. Such unpleasant information is an excellent food for meditation, isn't it? But it's not too late to avoid a global catastrophe, because everything is in our hands. Well, now is the time to talk about the distant future, that is, about the years 4000 and 5000. Due to population growth, consumption of goods produced on the planet will also increase. Even if scientists succeed in transferring some people to other planets, then it will be difficult to rebuild factories and plants here. Therefore, to feed a colossal population of several dozen billion people, there will be thousands of farms operating in the oceans that will produce food at an incredible scale. In these ocean farms, not only fish but also algae will be grown, which will then be used as food and fuel. Science and technology will go one step further, so it's almost 100% likely that telepathy will become one of the usual ways to increase brain functionality. Perceiving thoughts and transferring them to a distance will become a familiar habit, like reading, for example. And it may sound fantastic now, but it's real even now, if by thought transmission we mean the transmission of electrical signals from the brain. Thanks to the achievements of genetics, scientists will be able to create people with the highest level of intelligence and immortality. The direct connection of the brain to the computer, which will become an integral part of the lives of the people in the future, will give them an opportunity for the eternal life of the body. This means that the modern problems of impaired hearing, vision and memory, the problems with other important body functions and aging of the skin would simply disappear. In addition to all this, the body's ability to tolerate various diseases will increase significantly. Nanobots, which already exist in theory, will flow through our circulatory system, repairing cells. By the year 5000 or so, the language and currency borders will also be erased. Due to the large number of people that will inhabit the planet, humans will be in much closer contact with each other than they are now. Therefore, there'll be just a bunch of major languages that can be counted on one hand. Along with this, as you've figured out, there will be a single currency or an entirely electronic money that can be used anywhere in the world. Time passes, folks, and the years 7000 and 8000 are already here. Whatever happens inside of the Earth and on the surface of our planet, some phenomena will remain unchanged. The Earth will continue to revolve around the Sun. The Moon will continue to orbit the Earth. However, astronomical cycles will change slowly but significantly. The gravitational opposition between the Earth and the Moon will persist, but our satellite will move away several inches each year, decreasing in the sky until it finally becomes so small that it can no longer cause a total solar eclipse. And as we said before, people will have artificial intelligence. But that's not all. The problem of limb loss or injury will no longer bother the population, as incredibly realistic prostheses will be created. Let's say, moreover, anyone can replace any boring part of the body with a new bionic detail if he or she wants it. In addition to artificial limbs, artificial languages will also be created, and there'll be artificial builders and garbage collectors, and climate controllers, and nanobots will carry out all of these tasks. Just imagine, you don't need to do anything with your own hands. You just need to click a button or run some program, and lots of high-end mini-robots will perform any task. And finally, it's time to think of the future in 10,000 or 12,000 years. Of course, none of us can say with confidence what exactly would happen in such a long period of time. However, the stubborn futuristic scientists share their assumptions. Since we can't disprove their words, we have to believe in them. Therefore, at this point in time, the population of the planet may well become an immortal robotic army, living in an environmentally clean world which nanobots care about. Diseases will disappear. There'll be no wars. Guest visits will become trips in interplanetary elevators, but these are just assumptions. There's only one way to verify them: live until they come true. We hope you enjoyed watching The Future with us. Share your thoughts about this topic in the comments, and don't forget to give us a like. If you haven't checked Jelly Gummy Bear's channel yet, you should do it right away. You'll certainly like all the funny experiments.
Gummy bears probably cause cancer. Did you notice the, oh, that's not. Did you notice the one logical fallacy, mistaken reasoning?
You can't disprove it, you have to accept it.
If you can't disprove it, then you have to accept it. No.
There's a book called Homo Deus. It's a continuation of Homo sapiens, if you read that one.
Okay.
And it has predictions very similar to these predictions for the future of humanity.
Okay.
That means Homo Deus, that means human beings will be gods.
Well,
will strive for to be godlike.
that's always been the best concept connected with God. You know, we all object to that, but we object to the way it's used. If God is understood as what would the ideal being be, I think we should all strive to be an ideal being as best we can.
What he's trying to say, it says, what was it? I just had it here. Yuval Noah Harari, this guy from Israel. His first book was Homo sapiens. It was a general history of humans from the inception or from the start of converting, going from amphibians and walking on land and everything. but it's this, the follow-up book is for the future of humanity, and he thinks that human beings would be, they want to live forever. They want to extend a life, they're trying to renew limbs. There's a lot like.
Yeah, a lot more to talk about. We're gonna have a great discussion at Jason's. I hope you're coming. Coming to Jason's afterwards? You know, are you coming?
Oh, yeah, I'm gonna go.
Oh, well, at any rate, this is a fascinating subject, all of it. And as you see, they get pretty fanciful towards thousands of years out. Obviously, mental telepathy would have to be possible with some technology. Maybe people get chips in their brain. If telepathy could ever be accomplished, so could telekinesis. You know, why push a button like they're talking about? You just think it, and you're already connected to the internet. Who knows what all else? Now, I think this is a useful way of thinking about whether we are looking for utopia or dystopia. And that is, what would people of 100 years ago, or 1,000 years ago, or 2,000 or 3,000 years ago think of the present? We think, oh, they'd be wowed and so forth. But would they? Maybe they would see it as dystopian with all the stresses and strains of how to make a living, choose a career, decide where to live, what car to buy, questioning authorities, insulting the rulers, disbelieving in gods. There's a lot of stuff they would not probably like. How about all the kind of insurance you have to buy for things? Filling out innumerable forms for everything and a lot of other things. So just deciding how much and what to eat is clearly a problem for some of us. When the USSR still existed and defectors escaped to the US, many of them had difficulties handling the freedoms of all these responsibilities. And I suspect that our ancestors, whose lives were more predictable in many ways, would find these features of the 21st century somewhat dystopian. On the other hand, longer lifespans, effective medical care that actually works, car and air travel. I think I told a lot of you about my little story about how to get from Boston to DFW, which would have taken weeks or maybe months in the olden days. Also, we can go out and buy fresh fruits and vegetables year-round, and many other things like that would seem wondrous, if not approaching utopia, considering what our ancestors had to deal with. Of course, utopias seldom turn out as expected. Many efforts over the years on the behalf of people who are trying to start a utopian community. On the other hand, people have been saying since forever that things are getting worse and worse, right? Oh, the golden years was when I was a kid, and now the world is so terrible. But the truth really is that in many ways things are getting better and better. Like the guy on the little summary of 2017, oh my gosh, you know, people's rights in America. But in Saudi, they're just now allowing women to drive? Yeah. So the advances of science and technology ought to continue to improve our lives, often in unexpected and surprising ways. So smartphones. I was with my daughter at a restaurant. She gets a text from Google, review the restaurant. She didn't tell them where she was. They just knew from the GPS coordinates. AI and the internet. David Collins didn't make it today, but he's a big fan of AI. He thinks that 20, 30 years, none of us will have a driver's license. Nobody will learn how to drive, because the cars will drive themselves. And yes, it will put truckers out of work, but wouldn't it be better if they devoted their time and energies to something else?
Yeah.
And that's the other thing too, is that with innovation and improvements, there's going to be people that will be dislocated, people that will have to find a different way to do things. I mean, if they replace positions with robots, I'll be out of a job. I don't think it's going to happen anytime soon, but would I rather do something else? Yeah, sure. Merlin.
Just recently, Egypt passed a law that if you don't believe in God, you can be killed.
Oh, yes, right. And Saudi, Pakistan have similar things. Egypt's a bad one. Genetic engineering, right? Pretty soon our genetic code is just going to be AG, adenine, thymine, guanine, and cytosine. We'll be able to write it out. Yes?
What about social engineering?
Yes, and of course social engineering, and that goes along with something I'm going to talk about next, right after robotic production. Just think if robots were able to produce all the goods and services that anybody wanted. It's got to come to that. But then what will the people do, and what will happen during those transition years? Will people be ground down into poverty, or will there be a national guaranteed income, which has been speculated upon? So a movie about the wonderful world of tomorrow in which all the problems were solved, it wouldn't offer much drama, so we don't see that much. Although In Star Trek, we see kind of an ideal world, but it's still, and it shows humanity having escaped destroying itself. But there's still these alien enemies and threats to deal with, and we have cause for concern about many things. So, and that was a good point you made about that. Climate change, of course, loss of privacy. Well, think about this. Nobody wants to have all their information out on the internet where everybody can check on them every day, but one of the defects of our modern society is that we don't live in communities of 100 to 150 people where everybody knows each other's business, and you know which people are trustworthy and that you can deal with and which ones don't play nice with others. You know, that kind of ties into crime statistics. If everything was out in the public, everybody, not just for some, it might be easier to kind of keep track of people. The danger, of course, is that who would be keeping track of the big brother. But I can see eventually that due process might amount to due process with respect to what happens to your information. Not just by the government managing it, but irresponsibly used by an individual, which right now is kind of the Wild West with all of that stuff. There's a case in Minnesota where a young lady got a mailing with a bunch of baby coupons and stuff, and her family was aghast. When would you be getting this? You're 14 years old. Well, she had bought 2 or 3 items from the store in the last week or so, which placed her at a 90% probability, according to the AI and the algorithms, that she was pregnant. And guess what? She was pregnant. Yeah. Then you have emergent diseases. We had the Ebola scare here recently, and we're looking at some nasty varieties of flu that are out there. And rogue nations with nukes. What is going to happen with North Korea? Nobody knows. How about an asteroid impact? They talked about that as a possibility too. What other thing he mentioned, the social engineering. Again, maybe it would depend a little bit on what's being engineered, to whose benefit, in what way. So, like with so many things, it's going to be drilling down into the details.
What is that? What is social engineering?
Well, in other words, passing laws or otherwise having government policies. Anymore, they don't usually pass laws, they just do it through the federal agencies. Did you have something specific in mind?
Or it could be the likelihood of being able to influence someone to change what their preconceived ideas are. So, say that you wanted to go to the store and buy X amount of this and X amount of this. Social engineering says I can find a way to influence you passively to buy this and this, which makes you a better consumer. For me,
I think there's a book called Push, which talks about all the marketing tricks. The people who have products and services to sell know what will get you to buy. So obviously the only defense is for you to find out about those things too.
it's just not researched a lot because of ethics and stuff, I believe.
Well, there was a discussion about net neutrality. That's, they want to pass a law that's gonna give control of net to specific, whoever is directing or owns that domain, like Yahoo and they're already doing it. They're already putting out, when Yahoo puts out the news and everything on his page, they pick and choose with algorithms. Now then they may start picking and choosing for their benefit, or whoever pays the most money. So
Well,
you
these
wouldn't
are-
even know, today you don't
Yeah.
even know why that article is there, why are they, we're already there.
Well, if you might have noticed, if you buy a pair of shoes online, for weeks afterwards, there's ads that follow you around trying to sell you
Oh,
shoes.
Absolutely.
But this may come down to something,
Even if you browse one site one time,
yes,
even if you disallow your cookies, they still have your IP address.
And that's
Right.
preventable.
Well, at least it's on a different device, that's really scary.
Tim, is that, Push, is that a recent publication?
it's within the last few years, I believe.
Okay.
I think it's called Push.
Okay, that sounds interesting, all right.
Go ahead.
Yeah,
Just so
Yes.
you
I
know,
mean, this is not new.
all that stuff online
It's
is
probably less
preventable.
30, 40
You can
years.
get a VPN for like $3 a month and just run through a VPN and just go, literally just add a step from your identity to the internet. So
Yeah.
you'd be going from like my laptop to a computer in Germany to the internet as opposed from my computer.
Yeah,
So that your traffic wouldn't be able to be analyzed and they wouldn't be able to use you as a,
everybody has your IP address then. If you go to a
Right, but
VPN,
he's saying with the
The whole-
virtual private network, in
Yeah,
other words,
but
there's
still,
already
if
countermeasures
you access
developing.
anywhere,
Mhm.
anytime,
Right.
and they have that maturity now,
Right.
they have your IP.
Right.
Once
Well-
they have it,
But it just adds an extra layer of security so people can't track your.
So when,
Yeah, they
when
can't, you can't,
so when
but you have
Microsoft first came
limits.
out with its operating system, remember they started incorporating all these additional features, and Microsoft
The
was
only
pilloried
thing
for
is
trying
you
to
have-
drive their competitors out of business, but
The only
maybe this will
thing-
be the next iteration of Windows that you'll get a VPN built in, because everybody wants that.
your only chance if you have, internet provider that gives you an IP address from a pool.
Yeah.
That's the only way
Most
that,
of them are unless you're a business IP. Most of your IPs are dynamic.
if
Just
if
tracked by
dynamic
cities.
IP, then
John
you're
is
safe.
John is just pointing out our time that we need to
Okay.
kind of finish up here, but there's, one thing we can say about the future, Utopia or Dystopia, is that there's gonna be a struggle to get it tilted in one direction rather than another. It's like with this net neutrality stuff. I would compare it to, the former freedom to sell and buy from whoever you want, regard, in other words, you wouldn't have to go patronize a store or allow a customer in a store who had a skin complexion you didn't like. And the courts finally came down and said, no, that's not a freedom. You can't treat people differently based on that.
I don't think
It's not
there's.
the Constitution, but, they were able to pull it out with due process and the 14th Amendment and things like that, and that's a good thing. So these kind of things are gonna lead to abuses that we're already beginning to see. Those abuses are gonna get bad enough to where people rise up and say, this has gotta be done. I mean, they're finally doing that with some things. Some of these nutritional supplements, frauds and things like that, the Federal Trade Commission is cracking down more than they used to. So it's gonna be a struggle, and you all need to be a part of that. We all need to be a part of that struggle.
It's all about money. If you wanna make money, you have to pump ideas.
Of course, and that's, with the situation with the crooks too, and the hackers, So please give that some thought. I think that's a lot to think about. That should last you until February 4th. I want to remind you that Freethought is not free. Please give us your generous tax-deductible donations in one of the rainbow boxes in the back. We really appreciate cash, checks, negotiable instruments, gold, coin, any kind of coin, actually.